Why is IXL used in 95 of the top 100 U.S. school districts? Because it works. IXL is research proven to benefit all student populations, including English language learners and special education classrooms. IXL is an all-inclusive online learning and teaching solution for K-12 that accelerates achievement, saves teachers time, and more. This one platform helps you accomplish what normally would require dozens of other tools. For example, as students practice skills, IXL automatically differentiates learning to help them master concepts at their own pace. Teachers get real-time insights into how students are performing so they can provide timely support. What I love about IXL are the personalized SAT and ACT study plans. Students just need to enter the most recent test score, and IXL automatically generates a custom list of skills they should work on to improve their scores. Discover what IXL can do for your school. Visit IXL.com/PM today.
You're listening to Monday Matters, a Principal Matters podcast production.
Hi, friends. This is Will Parker back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for another Monday Matters. Jen, we're at the end of August. You and I have both been in the process. We're recording this before all of these things happen. You and I are in the you started school in your new position and your new role. I have just finished a lot of PD mostly across your state. I was in Ohio several times in August. I also had a wonderful weekend that's going to be happening before this comes out with my family, because it was the only weekend we could get all of our kids together, was in August. So welcome back to a new school year. If it's okay, I wanted to share this week on a post that I wrote a long time ago when I was working on my book, Pause, Breathe, Flourish, on reflecting on your influence. And I want to, if it's okay, I want to begin with a story, because I've shared the story before, but years ago, our son Jack, when he was in elementary school, came home one day and he had a really bad fever, and no, he just felt bad. So Missy took him to the doctor. They did a quick swab and said, "Oh, he has strep. So here's some antibiotics. Take him home, rest." Well, he did, but he didn't get better. The next day he had a rash. The next day he felt even worse. Third day, when he woke up, he couldn't get out of bed. He couldn't walk. And we rushed him. I mean, I remember carrying him into the car, into the hospital. And a young doctor took a quick look at him. And I'm so grateful for medical people who know what they're doing. And he said, "This looks like Kawasaki." It's in really small children, but he's like in second grade, but he has all the symptoms. So they rushed him to the Children's Hospital in Tulsa. And we spent 10 days watching Jack recover. He had to have these antibiotic infusions, because if you don't treat it, it can actually be fatal. It can end up creating stress on your heart. Yeah. So they were taking heart echoes. He was having a hard time responding to the medication. But finally they got him stabilized. And as he got better, I watched this medical team just care for my son. And it was hard to go through this as a father. It was hard to be out of school that many days. But as I sat and I watched this team care for all these kids in that ward, but also care for Jack, I noticed that their like professional commitments and to do their responsibilities, whether it was somebody taking blood or cleaning the room or diagnosing him or administering medicine, it was like that was never divorced from like their care for the patient, like their kindness and their compassion. And I was watching all these dynamics, and then I was just thinking about like you do, Jen, how does this lesson help me think about my school?
Right.
And I realized like the power of that collective influence. It reminds me a lot of what we see teachers do and what we see administrators do, which is, how are we making sure that we're showing up doing the thing that we've been asked to do, but also that when we step into a room, the heart that we have is also bringing healing too. And I know, so that sounds really philosophical, but I want to make it practical and talk about, how do we examine our influence? How do we examine the way that we are working so that we're not just accomplishing the head piece, but we're also accomplishing the heart piece? So let me just pause there for a second.
Well, I want you to get to that practical stuff, right? Before I react, I want like our listeners to know, well, yeah, Will, but how?
Well, there's lots of ways, but I don't want to prescribe, Jen. You know how
Right.
I am. But I do want to encourage. I just want you to think about, you know, here are some suggestions for things for you to think about as you're stepping into a new school year when it comes to your own influence. I like to think about influence, Jen, like uh, you're the thermostat. Not the you shouldn't be at the thermometer. You should be the thermostat. When you walk into a room, are you making it better or worse?
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we fail to kind of recognize how we're making a room when we step in.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I like to ask myself is, who am I pouring into? Who am I mentoring? Who might need my input that um, that is needing something from me that has become second nature, but I didn't recognize it as second nature until I've asked to help them. I was working with a team at the time of this recording. This was just a few days ago. And there was a lot of veteran teachers in this room. And gosh, Jen, there was one gentleman in the room. This was like his 50-something year. Like he's been teaching as long as I've been alive. And there was another teacher there, 43 years. And so they're still there. And so I was recognizing a lot of these veterans in the room, and I said, some of you guys that have been doing this for so long, there are some things you just do that are so second nature to you. You don't even realize how good you are.
Right.
But there's somebody across the hall from you or down the building from you who might benefit from your experience, but you may not even know it until you decide to, let me go pour into them
Mm-hmm.
and kind of see what they might need to learn that I could help teach them. And so I think sometimes we can become really insular, isolated, focused on our job description, but looking outside of ourselves and asking, who can I be pouring into, is one way to make sure that influence is moving beyond just the immediate group that you're caring for right in front of you. The second thing I'll say is service and help. Those are words that I think have to be at the top of our list of things to do. There was an article years ago in the New York Times where a researcher went and looked at all the obituaries for like 10 years. And he tried to find what was the most common words used to describe someone when they die. And the word that came to the top of the list was the word help. And the person I saw writing about this was just going, I think that defines what we really care the most about in people.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we really assess, like, what did I like about this person? It's almost always how they helped me. And that may sound selfish, but the truth is that if you show up with a servant's heart, people are going to remember you for that. They're not going to remember you for the initiatives. They're not going to remember you for the budgets. They're not going to remember you for all those things that we really care about in our daily job descriptions. They're going to care about the fact that you're willing to jump in the cafeteria line and help when those kids get too long, or that you're willing to stand out in the cold weather when it's parent pickup. They're going to care that you were willing to get on a bus with the kid that was struggling that day and ride home with him or her. Which leads to my point number 3, Jen, which is we lead by going first. We lead by example. If we want to see a positive influence happening from our work, but also collectively, like I saw in that medical team with my son, we want to be that to our students. We go first. We're the ones that are exemplifying that. So let me stop for a second, because I know you have a lot of thoughts.
Well, I'm going to point out something that you maybe haven't even thought about. These are all 3 very different manifestations of the same thing, which is that, leading, serving, helping. So you want to be a mentor, you want to serve, and literally serve at the cafeteria, like you said, or be the one that grabs the mop when the custodian is in a different room and there's a mess to clean up. And that does set an example for the people on your team. It's the positivity and the willingness to jump in and help out. I love to be a helper. Many educators love to be helpers. And so the good news is you found yourself exactly where you belong, because there's a lot of helping that needs done. So I think those first 3 are the same theme. And then, your next few aren't too far from it either.
No. So I have 3 more. One is if we are going to be leaders of learning, we have to model good instruction. So when you host a faculty meeting, when you're holding a parent orientation, when you're leading maybe a student leadership advisory group, whatever that is, you're consistently modeling for others what you would want a great classroom to look like. And I've told this story before, but one of my favorite superintendents in my younger years was Dr. Mary Jane Bias, who, when I was a brand new assistant principal, she was probably in her 30th year by that point. And which is so funny, Jen, because now we're in our 30th years. But she was, I remember one time she held a parent meeting at our school. There had been some problems with our schedule. The first day of school, we had just transitioned to, I won't name the company, but we just transitioned to a new system, and it lost about 100 kids' schedule. It was like the first day of school was so chaotic. And so she just called a parent meeting because she recognized this was really bad PR for our district, but also just bad service.
Right.
And a lot of parents came in with concerns, and she opened the meeting. She set the stage. She explained what was happening. She's made commitments. She asked for feedback, and then the meeting was over. And I was just standing there watching her the whole time going, wow, she's managing this entire room of people in such a effective way. And so I just came up to her afterwards and just commented, that was a great meeting. Thank you that didn't go like I expected it. And she just stopped and looked at me, and she was like, well, Will, every setting is a classroom. I just ran this meeting like I did when I was a classroom teacher. Just like I do my board meetings, just like I do a chamber of commerce. If you approach every setting like a classroom, you're going to see the same outcomes as a good classroom. Then she walked away, and I'm sure she had no idea,
Right.
light bulb, like how important it was for me to see her model the thing that she wanted me to be building to.
Right.
Number 5 is this. You have a platform whether you like it or not. You do. Every person who's got a position of leadership has a platform. And that means that your ability to say things and people listen means you've got to take advantage of the platform. So you need periodic, scheduled, intentional ways to broadcast and amplify and celebrate the wonderful experiences that people are having in your schools. And people, you've heard me say this so many times, Jen, but I'm going to say it again. In the absence of a narrative, people create their own, and they're typically negative ones. And so part of the way that we influence is we look at the great things that are happening, we take note of it, and then we broadcast it out to other people. So I like to do, as a principal, I love to do what I called kudos emails, where I walk through my school, I might visit 2 or 3 or 4 classes. I actually would take notes on really great student practices I saw happening. And then later I would just sit down and say, kudos, today when I walked through the school 3rd period, I saw this happening in Miss Merton's class, and this happening in Miss Johnson's class, and this happening in Mr. Soule's class, and this happening in Miss Meyer's class, and celebrate kids and teachers. That's all I have to do.
Right.
Or I might take photos of that, and later it gets put out on social media, or maybe it goes in the newsletter, or maybe when I have a chamber meeting, I actually bring copies of those celebrations so people can also hear about it. But Jen, people don't know if we don't broadcast.
That's right.
And then number 6, you and I mentioned this in a previous episode, but John Gordon has this saying of don't be an energy vampire, be an energy builder. And what I don't want people to do is the mistake that I said earlier. Like John Gordon said he knew a coach that would put a picture of a vampire on a gym wall and write kids' names on it when they were sucking the energy out of a team. What he tries to teach in that lesson is just recognize that in every setting, in every community, in every team, you have the choice. You can either suck the life out of an idea or the room, or you can be the one that builds up the life in that room. Be the builder. Be the one that builds up others in those moments. And it doesn't mean you avoid reality. It doesn't mean you don't have hard conversations. I'm not saying that. I'm not talking about toxic positivity. I'm talking about the ability to make a choice, that I'm going to be the one that looks for the opportunity here, not just the challenge. I'm going to adopt a growth mindset like Carol Dweck's research talks about, where when a student says to me, I'm just not good at math, I can say, you know what? You don't know how to solve that problem yet, but let me help you.
Right.
I'm going to take that mindset to build the energy instead of just suck the energy out of an opportunity. So, Jen, those are just some ideas for listeners to keep in mind about their own influence.
Well, and I'm going to tie them all together. The last three that you mentioned are really about being a teacher. And I would even argue that all six of them are the same thing. You know, we go into education to teach, to serve, to guide, to bring the energy, to bring the positivity. And honestly, that's where influence is. If you go into a room with a grenade, you want to just blow everything up, make people feel bad, then you are using the influence that you've been given in ways that are very harmful. And I don't think anybody who's listening wants that. They want to be the positive builder-uppers and bring the energy. And so I love these 6 little strategies that people can use to make sure their influence is channeled in appropriate and really impactful ways.
Well, thanks, Jen. Principal Matters listeners, I'm going to link to an old post from a few years ago when I was delivering a keynote to a system of schools that I've worked with for a long time now, the Archdiocese of Louisville's Catholic schools. And Jen, you and I both have the opportunity to work in public schools and private schools in so many different settings. And this community invited me to come do their opening for teachers. And so along with, if you want to see the notes that Jen and I are referring to, I'm going to just link this old post because I took that part of the keynote and I just shared that recording as a Principal Matters update. So if you want to hear me share this, some of these same ideas with other teachers, or if you want to listen to that and share it with someone that you might want to encourage in their own work, you can check that out. We'll put that in the show notes. Jen, as we wrap up, I want listeners to know how they can stay connected with both of our works. We don't often do this one. I'm going to just pause for a second and talk about our books and some of our PD that we're offering as we step into a new school year. First, I'm going to talk about you. You're the author of at least 5 or 6 books now, Jen. What are some of the things that you've written about over the years that leaders have found that I can name them, but I'm not going to name all of them. But what are some of the topics that you love to talk about the most?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day about my jam, and my jam is principals and helping them work on not only themselves as leaders, but also lead their buildings in ways that people will be happy to work there. And so I have a book for new principals, and it's called You're the Principal, Now What? And the second one was the Principal Reboot. And that was intended to be for veteran principals and to really bring energy back where we may have lost it. Now that book, I always joke, it came out on March 17th, 2020. So not my bestseller because everybody was busy that day. With COVID. And then, my 3 favorites all honestly followed those. I wrote a book called The Teacher's Principle, and it's how to be a principal that teachers really need. And then I wrote one, The Principal's Guide to Conflict Management. This is maybe one of my favorites because it's real practical on how to deal with conflict. I wrote a QRG. ASCD is my publisher, and they call them QRGs, Quick Reference Guides on Evaluating and Observations of Teachers. And then I wrote a book called Trust Pillars and Trust Killers. And that's, trust really is so critical for principals. And many principals don't know some of the things that they may inadvertently do that break trust. So that's kind of my body of work. And why don't we tell about yours?
Well, and I've had the privilege of reading your books, Jen, and also being in several of your presentations. And so it's just been, sometimes I forget like the depth of not only what we get to do in the show, but also just like the breadth of work you've done outside of our time together that I get to sometimes read or watch too. So thank you for all those contributions. Principal Matters was my first book that I wrote as a practicing principal, just for reflections and lessons that I was learning along that path that I thought could be helpful for other leaders. My second book, Messaging Matters, was written with Solution Tree because it was really the book that focused on that point I was making about platforms. How do you really communicate in ways that are inspiring students, motivating teachers, and reaching communities? My third book, Pause, Breathe, Flourish, Living Your Best Life as an Educator, was written in response around COVID, but from practice years before that, for leaders that kept coming to me and saying, man, Will, how do I do this sustainably? I'm struggling.
Mhm.
And so it was a whole book of reflection on your own personal priorities and growth and self-care.
Yeah.
And then my last book, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? Which it's funny, Jen, I probably have had fewer of those books sold than any of those books too, but it was probably one of my favorites to write because it was for the leaders that kept asking me the what's next question.
Mhm.
What should I be doing next? So a lot of times when someone calls me and they're wrestling, I'll coach them, but then I'll say, I'm going to send you a copy of
Yeah.
this book because this was my what's next. I 20 chapters of what I went through to figure out what I was going to be doing next in my work. So Jen, if anyone's listening and you hear any of those topics or conversations that might be helpful for you, you can obviously check out our work at our websites, mine at williamdparker.com. And where can they find yours, Jen?
Yeah, they can find me at jenschwanke.com. And clearly, Will and I have put a lot of words out into the world. And so we are proud of that work and happy to share it with any of you.
Well, we are. And I just want to say this as I step into a new school year. I want to say thank you to all the groups and organizations and conferences that reach out to Jen and me because you and I both, we have a lot going on. It's a full year, school year coming ahead. I like to plan, because I do this work full-time, Jen, I like to plan my PD as far out in advance as I can. So for me, 26, 27 is packed. And I know for you in your new role, but also in all the work you're doing as an author, you've got some other great things coming up too. In the future, we're going to talk about your work outside of education, the memoir that you've been working on that's going to be coming up, I think, in February.
Right? Correct.
Okay, so we'll keep you posted on that too. But listeners, thank you for the opportunity to reflect on your influence this week as you're stepping into the work that you're doing with your students. Just think about these questions. Who would you consider someone who's been the most influential to you? And how would you describe the ways that they influenced you that were so healthy and not toxic? And then just pick one thing from that person's example and you're like, I'm going to model that this week.
Right.
I'm going to model that this week too, because what you do matters. So until next time, thank you. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Monday Matters.